First let's try and understand how the noise gate works. I am going to use an example that I heard once upon a time in a faraway tutorial from a fella who goes by the YouTube name, Wikimedia. Now, get your metaphorical mindset working, because I will give you the example now. So, in this project I have my vocal sample, here, and my noise gate plugin, here. Imagine that the audio waveform we have here is a queue of people waiting to get into a club. Now, let's pretend that the threshold slider is the door to the club. When it's all the way up like this, the club will only let the people that are taller than the door through. Looking at a real example of when you would use a noise gate. Let's say you recorded some guitar or vocals in your bedroom with your own home equipment. Once you had finished your recording, you would have a waveform that looked something like the one I have used in this example. It would have loud bits where you were singing or playing guitar. You would also have quiet bits. These bits would probably only have background noise, and the recording would sound better without them. You could use the noise gate to let through all of the lovely, nice, loud parts of the recording, and cut out the horrible, quiet, background parts. Yes. So, let's look at this a bit more accurately. If I bypass the noise gate, and then play the vocal sample on a loop, you can see that on the mix fader for this track, there is a little box at the top of the fader that says, -10 dB. This box indicates the highest volume that it hears from regions that are on your track. In this case, a vocal sample. This is a useful little indicator that will turn red if there is any clipping on your tracks, so get into the habit of keeping an eye on it with all your tracks. So, our mix fader tells us that the loudest part of our vocal sample reaches up to 10 dB. Or, the tallest people in the queue for our club are, let's say, 10 feet. So, let's look back at our noise gate plugin, or club if you are still using your imagination. Looking back at the threshold now, remember this is the door of our club. At the moment, the door is only letting people that are taller than 0 dB into the club. However, we know that the tallest people in our queue are still only -10 dB. And we know this because we just checked over in the clipping box here. So, until we bring the door down further than -10 dB, none of our audio will be loud enough to get into the club. I will now bring the threshold down to -10 dB to show you. So even at -10 dB there should still be no sound, because the audio has to be louder than the threshold to pass through. So, from this point onwards, it is going to start letting through only the loudest parts of the sound, and then gradually allow more and more through. Looking back at our example with the club, as the door comes down below -10 dB, it starts letting everyone that is taller than that through into the club. Hopefully they have a good night. Right, that's enough bloody chat. Let's start bringing the threshold slider down and we can see how it sounds as more and more of the audio is let through. Here we go. I hope by now, I have managed to give you a good idea of how the threshold slider works. So let's go and have a look at some of the other parameters. The reduction slider lets you choose how much reduction you want to apply to the audio that isn't louder than the threshold. In our example, we could say that the reduction slider is our bouncer, and when he is all the way down at -100 dB, he is not letting any little bugger in, even if their life depends on it. But if the slider is at -50 dB, then the gate will only reduce the volume by 50 dB instead of cutting it out completely. So we could say, if our reduction slider or bouncer is up at -50 dB, then he is not being such a bellend, and he is letting some of the underage kids in, but not all of them. Moving on to the attack, hold, and release settings. These should be pretty self-explained by now if you have been watching my other tutorials. I will quickly go through them however. So, the attack lets you choose how quickly you want the noise gate to start working after it hears the audio. The hold is very much like the sustain part of a typical envelope. This knob lets you set how long you want the gating to continue for, whereas the release is asking you how long you want it to take for the gating to fade away. Yes, that's it. Think of the attack and release settings as faders that fade into and out of the sound. Let's play this vocal on a loop and set the threshold to -15 dB. Then I will show the effects of each of the 3 envelope knobs I have just talked about. Let's have a listen to the effects of these.
Let the rhythm groove you tonight. 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 Let the rhythm groove you.
So, I hope that you managed to hear the effects of each of those sliders yourself, but how you set them really does depend on the audio sample you are using and what you are using it for. Now, the next slider we will look at is the hysteresis slider. This slider lets you choose the broadness around the threshold. In other words, if the slider is at 0 dB, then it will only let the audio above the threshold through, but with no allowances. Now, if I bring my slider down to -10 dB, this is basically saying that audio within the area of 10 dB around the threshold will be able to pass through now. I hope my little diagram helps you to understand this. The look ahead does exactly what it says on the label. It looks ahead of time and analyzes the audio before it goes through the noise gate. So, if we put this into our example, we could say, the look ahead is letting you choose how far down the queue the bouncer is looking before the punctors get to the door. The further down he can see, and the more accurate his decision-making will be. Right. That is it for this tutorial. If you want to know about the side chaining section of this plugin, then have a look at my website where there is a whole page dedicated to things you can do with side chaining. Thanks for watching. Now go and get your ass into gear and gate the shit out of everything for one whole day so you get to know this plugin inside out. Take care, and see you next time.